Friends, it's about bloody time I made a video. I've taken a short hiatus from making videos just because this and that, you know, this takes a lot of time making videos, so I apologize. But anyway, so let's make a new video after 2 weeks, see if I can still do it, and see what we come up with here. So on my shoulder I have a rifle, and this rifle is one that you've probably seen a lot. I mean, the sheer volume of YouTube videos on these rifles is, to me, astounding. But you know, obviously it's for good reason. This here is the M48 Yugoslavian Mauser, and there's 1,000 videos that you can watch on these. But I'm going to make a rifle tour video about this. This is not a review. I'm just going to talk shit about this rifle for a little bit. I probably shouldn't swear because, as you can see, I'm wearing some pretty zesty. I don't even know what you used to call these. Like, I don't know, like a wind fly, or what these used to be in the 80s. This here is from CG85. I think it's CG85. Is that right? Anyway, Guelph, Ontario, Scouts Canada, all that different stuff. Last time I wore this, I was a teenager. Okay, so the Yugoslavian Mauser. First of all, I want to talk about it kind of from my perspective, because I don't really see too many videos that will talk about the kinds of things that interest me about a rifle. They never do. They never bring up what it is that makes a video on rifles interesting for me. And it has to do with the specific construction of this rifle that makes it special. No other rifle is like a Yugoslavian, basically intermediate length Mauser action. There's no other Mauser like this. Not really. It is almost unique in the world that I'm aware of. And the fact that these rifles, such as this one, which I picked up from Corwin Arms, over at Corwin Arms, if you're hearing me talking about Corwin Arms a fair amount in a bunch of my videos, it's because a gun store to me is kind of like having a barber. I don't really have that problem anymore. But having a good mechanic or having a good barber, somebody that you like what they do for that purpose. Okay, so that for me right now is Corwin Arms. He's putting an effort into bringing rifles into Canada that have immense collector interest, that are in fabulous condition, and I like to try to support, you know, retailers like that, just like you would for your barber. Keep them successful. Keep them going. So I like this. So this is from Corwin Arms, this M48. So what is it about these rifles that kind of make them different from all the rest? For example, the high quality German Mausers from World War II and all that different stuff. And the German Mauser rifles that were manufactured for South America. They're all beautiful rifles, but this is kind of an individual that stands out from the crowd. The M48. Now, I have owned a lot of these rifles. I think this particular rifle is 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my 5th Yugoslavian Mauser. One of them was actually a Syrian marked M48, but I've owned the Bez Oznaski unmarked M48 BO, Bez Oznaski. I've had those rifles. I thought they were great. I had the K98K, the actual German manufactured, full standard action, German manufactured scrubbed versions that were remarked and reissued to their soldiers after World War II. I've owned those Yugoslavian rebuilds. I've owned the M2447. I've owned an M48 Alpha and 2 M48s. I think that's the right number. I think there's one more in there somewhere. Anyway, so I know a little bit about these rifles. Now, what I can say about the M48 is that there are people out there who are going to say that are going to know a lot less about these rifles than me, and there's going to be a lot of people out there that know a lot more about these rifles than me. Okay, I'm just going to talk about it from my perspective. First of all, I'd like to talk about the wood on these rifles. And I'll give you a bit of a close-up here. Now, I've heard people refer to these stocks as teak. I've heard them refer to these stocks as beech. And pretty much every other type of wood under the sun. And it's always been a pet peeve of mine. Okay, so it's my look at that. I mean, it looks like a laminated stock, but it's not. It's a hardwood stock. Okay, this is called field elm. Okay, it's very, very common in Eastern Europe, and you know, all the way actually into Iran. It's really very resilient species of elm. It's called field elm or Ulmus minor. Okay, and it is a native species to the Balkans, and they have an incredible forest. You know, in the former Yugoslavia. I mean, especially in Bosnia, Hersegovina. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing those names right, but they have just an incredibly biologically and ecologically diverse area. So this is field elm. It's not teak. Okay, it's not oak. It's not beech. It's elm. Okay. People were saying, "Oh no, they made them with teak stalks." No, it just depends on what kind of cut you got from the log that makes it look like it's dark, and it could be teak. But teak is a species that only grows in like India, Burma, and Laos, places like that. Okay, so the Yugoslavians weren't going to go to India to get their top quality teak to make these rifles. No, I'm sorry, it's a fallacy. It's not true. So what are some of the properties of a stock like this, of elm? Well, some of the properties are there's some pros and there's some cons to having a rifle that is stocked. I mean, just look at it though. I mean, but there are pros and cons to having a rifle that's stocked, like this. Like say, even compared to a German or World War I era rifle, the laminates that the Germans put out had a tendency to be somewhat heavy. This is heavier than a laminated stock, easily heavier. So what are some of the qualities of elm that are pros and cons? So, well, I'm not sure if these are pros or cons or not, but let's start on the outside of the rifle. Generally, with most of these trees, what you'll have is kind of an area around the outside perimeter of the tree, 3, 4, 5, 6 inches, depending on the diameter of the tree. And that is called the sap wood. Okay, and then towards the center of these trees, I mean, if they're in good health, vigor, and condition, the center of the tree is probably upwards of about half of the entire diameter of the tree, maybe a bit more, is called heartwood. And that wood has a tendency, because of tannins and age, it's cured, it's darker. Okay, so new wood is kind of pale or white, and older wood gets darker and darker and darker. Very much like human beings. Actually, no, we probably get whiter as we age. Anyway, so that's kind of a basic principle for most hardwoods that you'll see. That includes oak and all kinds of different hardwood species like elm that have those qualities. So it's kind of a pale to a dark red brown towards the middle, and depending on what part of the stock that came out of that elm is where your stock came from will indicate how dark the wood is. Now, this is not a significantly pale stock. I would say it's kind of a medium red brown. So this is probably I would say probably in the middle third of that tree that was cut. So it's kind of a medium dark red, and looking kind of at the profile of the contour, this was a fairly large diameter tree. So at least in the middle of its lifespan, you can tell by just the distance between the annual growth rings, was that this was an extremely healthy tree, It was putting on lots of annual increment, and just look at the space between those annual growth rings. It was a very healthy tree, and probably growing in an exceedingly good growing environment. Elm trees they're very much like fresh soils, which means you're probably on a moderate to steep slope. Okay, so there's water passing underneath the tree, and it just continues on, constantly aerated, lots of moisture, but it's not stagnant and sitting on a flat lower recess or something like that. Okay, so the water is passing underneath the roots of the tree. They're relatively shallow rooting species, so these trees, these elm trees, can grow in lower valley bottom areas where there is a fair high volume of moisture in the soil, like along riparian areas of creeks and stuff like that. They'll do that. They're also very, very good dealing with late summer droughts. Very resilient tree, which is one of the pros, I suppose, of the species. They have what I refer to as short tracheids, elm trees, and that basically is the length of the wood fiber cell. Okay, so wood cells kind of look like they're long and thin, kind of like a straw. And so the longer the wood cell it is, the better it is at, for example, spruce have incredibly long tracheids. That's why they're so good at making like paper or craft paper or cardboard. You use spruce for that, right? But for a species like elm, the woods, basically the wood cells, the tracheids, like a straw, is very, very, very short, which means you can crush it or dent it relatively easily and it won't spring back. Okay, once it's pretty much, because the wood cells are so short, if they can cause slivers or splinters, and so a lot of these stocks are rough. Now, I have not done any polishing really of any significance on this rifle, but I had to do some, because if I didn't, I would be getting slivers from this stock. Okay, it's just one of the, doesn't matter what it is, if it's made of elm, there's a good chance you're going to get a sliver, depending on how well polished they are. So this rifle basically came out of Greece, came out of wrap. It's essentially a brand spanking new M48 Yugoslavian Mauser is what I have over my shoulder here. Incredibly grateful to Martin at Corwin Arms for getting me this rifle. And so many of them are just like this. They're just like this. I hope he gets more in. So once you crush or dent this wood, is unlikely you're ever going to be able to steam it out. Is it going to be a permanently marked feature? And you'll see a lot of these older M48s, they look pretty rough. Okay, because the stocks don't deal well with being handled roughly that way, even though it is a fairly hard wood. The tracheids are so short. So rough grain, it does not take planing worth a damn. In fact, if you were to plane this wood, because the grain is so wavy in the wood, carpenters don't know what I'm talking about. You got lots of spiral grain or movement or waves in the grain. And if you look at the cross section of, if you were to look at it from, you're looking down on a stump, you'll see the annual growth rings. If you actually examine the annual growth rings in this species, even the growth rings are wavy. Everything about this wood makes it difficult to split with an axe. It is so strong that way. Okay, and it's so hard and dense, is that trying to split this wood for firewood, if you were ever to need to do that, it's going to be harder for you. Okay, it's not going to be as easy. Lots of beautiful rays as well. Just beautiful. Okay, so rough grain. Hard to split, difficult to machine. You will have pieces of the wood actually blow out if you're trying to plane it because of the waviness of the grain, right? You'll cut up into the grain and it will not finish well, finishing these rifles that way. So you will see little tiny chunks in these stocks that are missing because of that feature of elm. There's all kinds of different things I could tell you about the tree species. But again, this is just, one of the features of this rifle is to understand, what makes it unique. And half of this rifle, and in fact, probably even more of it, is the stock. in this. The wood and the attributes of elm. Nobody else makes rifle stocks out of elm. It's an anomaly. Nobody does it. But these folks did. It's not very durable to rot. It's not terribly good that way, but it is really good for being stable into dry or to really moist conditions. It does not warp or move anywhere near as much as I would say, for example, walnut. Extremely strong that way. Extremely strong, and in many ways an incredible wood for a stock that could take a pounding. Okay, it's stable. Very dangerous to fall those trees. They generally have a very, 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 very wide crown, and they're really quite prone to rot. There's a disease out there called Dutch elms disease that is just a global nightmare. That's why you see, one of the reasons why you see so few things made out of elm is that the species is not endangered, but it's constantly under attack by this disease, and it's really susceptible to insects and bark beetles and stuff like that. So, from a forestry management perspective, it is more of a challenge. All right, so it's nice to just be able to get a stock like this. Okay, let's move on to something a little bit different. This here was probably, no doubt, all flat sawn out of the log, which means they're basically just planking the tree from top to bottom, cutting it into planks just because of the way the grain is. Some rifle stocks will be cleaner than this when it comes to the grain, but I personally kind of like the way it looks this way. It's good. One of the other things that I will also say about these rifles is when you're trying to get the cosmoline out of, these things are, when you get them out of the grease, they spared no expense when it came to how much cosmoline they put on these rifles. I mean, they are just caked with it. I mean, it is very impressive just how much cosmoline these rifles are in. All right, and sometimes it's got a really strong cosmoline smell to it, which, I don't particularly mind. I don't find it that offensive. Some people do. I don't have a problem with the smell of cosmoline. But sometimes getting it out of the wood so that it's not tacky anymore can be a little bit of a challenge. And so what I do is I use the barbecue. I heat it up, I wipe it down, heat it up, I wipe it down. Not too hot. We're not cooking it like a pork chop. We're just trying to warm it up. Okay, and when you get, I would say probably 80 to 90% of the cosmoline off of your stock doing it that way. And by the way, heating the metal components up also helps to get liquidize that cosmoline. You do need to be careful that you're not going to get it too hot where it's going to catch fire or sort of house fire. Okay, I'm not going to be responsible for giving you advice for stupid people. Sorry, but if that happens to you, you've done something stupid. Anyway, so that's the way I do it. So, but it is rough. It will be rough. You're going to have bits and pieces of your paper towels and stuff like that sticking to the rifle because these things are gritty because of the tiny. It's not smooth. Okay, when you get these rifles out of grease like that. So just a tiny amount of, I think I use 600 grit wet dry sandpaper just to take those little burrs off all the way around. And some of them are actually, you're going to get a sliver unless you polish that down. Okay, so you're going to need to do that. So anyways, after that whole process, I'm actually helping to draw some of the cosmoline out using oil and stuff like that. I'm kind of polishing it into the wood with wet dry sandpaper, just using conventional oil or WD-30 or whatever it is that you've got. Even if it's motor oil, doesn't matter. Then what I do is we'll degrease it. Okay, and by the way, I'm never sanding any of these stamps that are on the rifle because that to me is part of the wonderful part of these rifles, that there are marking stamps into the wood. Lots of BK stamps, and I think it's Pledge Deutsche is the name of the factory. But Getting back to cleaning up the wood from the cosmoline and so on. So I will degrease it, and then I will, after it's been polished and whatnot, then it'll get the boiled linseed oil treatment. You will find that the wood does not soak a lot of oil into it. Okay, so don't apply tons of linseed oil to the wood, because it'll just gonna get all sticky and shitty. Excuse me. So be very, very lean on the boiled linseed oil when you treat it, because it'll just make a mess, cause you more suffering. And you should be good to go. But so far, on the scale of being really interesting, I think these are seriously interesting. Okay, there is a book out there I'd recommend. I've owned this for years. I've actually read it. I can't remember most of it. I mean, again, like I said, if you want those kinds of M48 YouTube videos, there's thousands of them. Go check one of them out, and they'll tell you more. I will say that when it comes to the quality of the milling and the just kind of the polishing and stuff like that, it is lacking. It is absolutely lacking. The rifle is not like polished to a nice sheen. It is it's got very, very pronounced. You can see the milling marks on these rifles. Okay, these are a working rifle. They are made to function for a specific purpose, and I mean, just look at the rails and the bolt right there. All right, so all of that rough tooling, they are a little bit more rough to operate this way, and they will bind because there is more surface area making surface area because it's a rough surface. But you can polish those connecting areas. There are things you can do. It depends on what level of a mill strip collector that you are. Some people want to keep them 100%, in original condition and never shoot them. I am a shooter and I enjoy shooting, but I want the rifle to function at its best possible performance. That's how I rock and roll, and so I don't have a problem doing those kinds of things, even if it means making the trigger work better. But I know how to do that stuff. I'm not going to screw the rifle up. I'm only going to improve it. But I do realize and I appreciate the people that want to try to keep these rifles as original as possible. The truth of the matter is, I guarantee you that if you've got a well-used M48, there was a soldier out there with a stone and a polisher, and he was trying to improve the performance of this old warhouse, because he probably had a love-hate relationship with it because of that, because the shootability of it is more difficult to run quickly and smoothly. Definitely reliable, okay, but it doesn't have that grace of the early German K98s and South American Mausers. But blood and guts, folks. But you knew that already. Hope we're all doing well. Don't want this video to be too long. Hope we're all doing well, and as always, Maple Leaf up.